Welcome to the Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program training. This training is intended to guide you, the lender, through processing an Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program loan from start to finish. We like to keep Minnesota Housing's mission in mind as we proceed with our day-to-day work, which is housing is the foundation for success, so we collaborate with individuals, communities, and partners to create, preserve, and finance affordable housing. The purpose of the Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program is to provide financing to low-income homeowners who need to rehabilitate their existing home in emergency situations or to provide accessibility to a disabled household resident. Eligible improvements would address system failures, structural failures, or accessibility needs within the property. When you think about a potential borrower who would be eligible for this program, think of homeowners who would typically not be able to secure financing with a home improvement loan through private financial institutions. A borrower selection policy refers to the specific wait list process instituted by each lender. Be sure to have a standardized, consistent process for placing applicants on a wait list and for addressing emergency situations. For example, many organizations simply use the first-come, first-served process for managing a wait list. Others have a first-come, first-served process, but they elevate emergency situations to the top of the list, as determined through a well-defined pre-application process. If you have additional questions regarding this policy, please contact a program manager referenced at the end of this training. In this training, we will cover the process for completing an Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program application. Please note that the process for submitting an emergency loan to Minnesota Housing is a little different than submitting a rehabilitation loan. The process begins with the borrower's application and the lender's review to determine if the borrower is eligible. The lender must inspect the property and document the emergency situation or the accessibility need, and then submit the loan to Minnesota Housing for approval. Once the loan is approved, the lender can close the loan with the borrower. After the loan is closed, the construction process can begin. When construction is completed, the lender will submit all final documentation as needed. If you are looking for additional training that is not covered in this slide presentation, please visit our website for the additional training options that we provide, which include the Rehabilitation Loan Program Overview, the Rehabilitation Loan Program Process Guide, and the Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program Overview. You can access the Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program manuals and forms by accessing our website at mnhousing.gov. Select the link for Home Improvement Partners, then the link RLP-ELP at the top of the screen. All of the documents referenced in this training will be found under ELP Manuals, Forms, and Resources. We have several resources available on our website to help guide you through the Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program. The process for an Emergency and Accessibility Loan is a little different than an RLP loan, taking into consideration that we want to address emergency situations as quickly as possible. The Improvement Approval Process Guide explains a step-by-step process for the lender. The Loan File Requirements Checklist is a useful guide to help you keep track of all of the documents that are needed to process each Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program file. Step 1, the Borrower Application. Have the borrower complete all sections and all pages of the borrower application. Ensure that each borrower signs and dates the last page and that all applicable boxes are marked. Ask the borrower to include all relevant income, asset, and/or mortgage documentation with their application. See the Loan File Requirements Checklist on the previous slide for a complete list of documents. Review each document and calculate income and assets to determine if the borrower is eligible for the program. When a borrower applies for the program, thoroughly explain the homeowner agreement. Have the borrower sign the last page of the form and make sure you sign as well. When reviewing credit for the application, Do not pull credit report. The only credit requirements are that all mortgage payments must be current and all property taxes must be paid and current as well. This information can be verified using the most recent mortgage and property tax statements. Borrowers must have gross annual projected incomes at or below 30% of the area median income for the Twin Cities metropolitan area. Refer to Minnesota Housing's website for the most accurate and up-to-date income limit information. You will need to calculate the borrower's income to ensure they meet the income threshold for the program. Use the income eligibility calculation worksheet as a reference for the types of acceptable documentation to support your income calculations. Keep a copy of your calculations in the loan file. There are often a variety of ways to calculate income, so it is important to show your math to illustrate how you determine income eligibility for each application. A borrower's total assets must not exceed $25,000 to be eligible for the program. Confirm that the borrower's total assets are within the program limits. To verify assets, collect 6 months of the most recent consecutive bank statements for all asset accounts. Review the statements for any undocumented or unusual deposits. If you notice any unusual deposits, ask the borrower for an explanation of the source of funds and make sure that there is not any additional income that needs to be included in your calculations. Assets include, but are not limited to, things such as cash on hand, securities or savings bonds, all land being sold on a contract for deed, cash value of life insurance policies, checking and savings accounts, recreational vehicles, life estate value on a property other than the subject property. If you have questions about determining assets or about other assets that must be included, please contact the program manager. The borrower must have clear title to the subject property as evidenced by a title search or title opinion and a copy of the deed. The lender is required to verify a legal description of the subject property, the borrower's ownership interest in the subject property, and any existing liens on the subject property. An owner's and encumbrance report, otherwise known as an O&E, is recommended but not required. If you do not order an O&E report through a title company, you must independently include the following documents in the loan file: the property's legal description, borrower's ownership interest using a chain of title record obtained through the county, copies of all recorded documents on the property, and a copy of the most current warranty deed. Be aware that there are several eligible and ineligible forms of ownership for this program. Eligible types of ownership include fee simple, leasehold estate, mobile home or manufactured home taxed as real property, mobile home or manufactured home taxed as personal property and located in a mobile home park, and a leasehold estate subject to a community land trust. Ineligible types of ownership include shares in a cooperative corporation, trusts, and reverse mortgages. If you are unsure of the type of ownership, please refer to your title verification documents listed on the previous slide or contact a program manager at Minnesota Housing. All properties must be covered by hazard insurance, which meets at a minimum the following requirements. Insurance must be in effect on the date of the mortgage. It must be provided in an amount sufficient to cover all lien amounts or 100% of the insurable value and protect against loss, damage from fire, and other hazards covered by the standard extended coverage endorsement, and it should allow for claims to be settled on a replacement cost basis. All insurance policies must contain a standard or union mortgage clause in the form customarily used. The mortgage clause should read, Minnesota Housing in care of, and your organization's name. When the lender establishes that a spouse permanently resides outside of the house, that separated spouse may be excluded from signing the Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program application and the note, but must sign the mortgage. If the spouse maintains ownership interest in the subject property, they must sign the mortgage. Once you receive all required pre-qualification documents and it appears that the borrower is eligible, Enter the loan information in the loan commitment system. You can access the commitment system through the partner login link on our website. This will reserve the funds for the loan in our system. However, reservation approval is contingent upon review and approval of the improvement by program managers at Minnesota Housing. Step 2, inspection and Minnesota Housing approval. When determining if an improvement is eligible for the Emergency and Accessibility Program, refer to the Improvement Eligibility Threshold form found on Minnesota Housing's website. Lenders are always encouraged to process a rehabilitation loan for a borrower when the improvement would not be considered an emergency. If an emergency is identified and there are other deficiencies that need to be addressed, the borrower could potentially receive both an emergency and accessibility loan and a rehabilitation loan. Keep in mind, each loan and borrower's needs are different and will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Lenders are encouraged to process emergency improvements under the Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program and other deficiencies under the Rehabilitation Loan Program. The lender should perform an inspection on the home to identify the emergency improvements or accessibility need of the property. Once the inspection has been performed, draft an inspection report detailing the improvements that are proposed, making sure to include information about the repairs and/or the replacements or deficient items. If it is determined after inspection that there is an emergency need or accessibility improvements are necessary, have the inspector specifically state the need in the report. Please note that there is no formal inspection form provided by Minnesota Housing, and the lender can submit this documentation in whichever form they prefer. However, if an accessibility need is identified, please also include a completed accessibility evaluation form in addition to the inspection report. Ensure that the inspector takes photographs of the deficiencies that have been identified to assist Minnesota Housing staff in making a decision. Please make sure that the photographs are clear and a description and the area of the home is listed. Have the borrower solicit at least 2 bids from a licensed contractor. Minnesota Housing understands that due to the nature of the Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program, it is often difficult to obtain more than 1 bid. If 2 bids cannot be solicited, the circumstances should be explained and noted in the loan file. All scope of work improvements must conform to all applicable codes and ordinances. All appropriate permits must be obtained. Lead testing does not need to be conducted with this program unless the repairs were necessitated by a lead paint health hazard. Unlike the Rehabilitation Loan Program, homeowner labor is not permitted. Once you determine that a borrower is eligible for the program, upload and submit all required documents listed on the Improvement Approval Worksheet, along with a copy of the worksheet itself, to Minnesota Housing. You can upload and submit the loan file via the Minnesota Housing Single Family Secure File Exchange, which can be accessed through the partner login link on our website. You will receive notification of receipt of the upload and additional information regarding the documents that are sent. After all requested documentation has been received, reviewed, and approved, an approval letter will be returned via email. Do not proceed with closing the loan or starting the project until you receive an approval letter via email from Minnesota Housing staff. Step 3, the loan closing. All applicable closing documents can be found on our website. Please note that there are different closing documents for properties taxed as real property, that is, properties that have a recorded deed, and property taxed as personal property, like a mobile home that has a title card. Review the title documents prior to closing to ensure that all borrowers, co-borrowers, and accommodation parties have been contacted to attend the loan closing. You, as the lender, will assign the mortgage and endorse the note to Minnesota Housing. The borrowers have a right of rescission period in which they have the right to cancel the loan within 3 days after signing before the loan is funded. After the 3-day right of rescission period ends, the lender can log onto the commitment system, enter the closing date and other required data, and submit the loan for fund approval. Within 2 business days, Minnesota Housing will issue 100% of the funds to pay the lender for the program loan, as well as the administrative fees. Immediately after the loan is funded, you will need to record the security agreement. For properties taxed as real property, the mortgage and assignment of mortgage will be recorded with the county recorder's office if it is an abstract property, or the registrar of titles if it is Torrens. Refer to the legal description of the property to determine whether it is an abstract or Torrens property. For a mobile home taxed as personal property, submit PS 2017 listing Minnesota Housing as the lien holder to the Department of Public Safety. After the loan is closed, you will need to send in all required post-closing documentation to Minnesota Housing and the loan servicer. The current loan servicing company is Amerinat, and their contact information is listed at the top of the loan transmittal form. Some documents listed on this form need to be submitted within 5 days of funding. The remainder should be submitted within 180 days of project completion. Refer to the loan transmittal form for a complete list of documents and instructions on which forms to send to either Minnesota Housing or the servicer and when they should be sent. Step 4, construction. Once the loan is closed, you will hold a pre-construction conference with the borrower and the contractor. In this meeting, you will discuss the borrower's responsibility, the contractor's obligations, the work schedule, as well as the process for resolving disputes, completing the project, and payments to the contractor. This is a good time to revisit the homeowner agreement that the borrower signed at the beginning of the application process. Also, review the proceed to work notice, which is signed by the contractor, the borrower, and the lender. The pre-construction conference is often, but not always, held the same day as the loan closing. Make sure the contractor's current license number is listed on the proceed to work notice, and document the date of the pre-construction conference in the loan file. The borrower and contractor enter into a contract before the work begins. The lender should obtain the following documents for the loan file: a sworn construction statement from the general contractor, invoices, and lien waivers for work performed and materials supplied by the general contractor, the subcontractor, and or material supplier. The lender disperses funds to the contractor as the rehab work is completed. Please note that Minnesota Housing does not provide specific forms for sworn construction statements from general contractors or for lien waivers. Each lender should use their own form. Ensure that the lien waivers list the actual dollar amount and whether the waiver is for a partial or payment in full. Make sure that the invoices reflect the actual amounts listed on the bid. The borrower and the contractor are responsible for ensuring that construction is completed within 120 days of the loan closing. Extensions must be approved by Minnesota Housing on a case-by-case basis. The lender should complete a post-rehab inspection, working with the jurisdiction's building official for final inspection completed when needed. Also obtain a lead clearance report if applicable. Once the work is completed, execute the completion certificate signed by you, the lender, and the borrower. Changes in the scope of work are not allowed unless unanticipated deficiencies are found during construction and must be approved in advance by Minnesota Housing staff. Use the change order form, which can be found on Minnesota Housing's website. Make sure the borrower, the lender, and the contractor sign and date the change order form. Send a copy of the form via the single-family secure file exchange to Minnesota Housing for preliminary approval. Contact a program manager for the documents required and instructions on how to proceed with the change order. Step 5, final document submission. When the project is completed, you will need to send in the final documents of the loan file within 180 days after the completion certificate has been executed and signed. Refer back to the loan transmittal sheet to determine which documents need to be sent at this stage and where to send them. For property taxed as real property, you will send the original recorded mortgage, recorded assignment of mortgage, which can be found on the Department of Commerce website, and the recorded loan modification agreement, if applicable, to the servicer. Copies of these documents will be sent to Minnesota Housing. These instructions are found on the loan transmittal sheet shown on the previous slide. For property tax as personal property, you will send the original lien holder card and the modification of the note and security agreement, if applicable, to the servicer. Copies will be sent to Minnesota Housing. Once again, please refer to the loan transmittal sheet for specific instructions. As a lender, you will need to remain compliant with retaining documents and loan records. You can access the Signature Records Retention Requirements form on the Minnesota Housing website for a complete list of documents that you are required to keep. You must retain any and all documents, including compliance with Minnesota Housing Program guidelines, for a period of at least 6 years from rehabilitation completion, including but not limited to the following: records for all rehabilitation improvements, including the scope of work, bids, lien waivers, fees, and completion certificates, a copy of the borrower application and written verification of income, as well as verification of the current property ownership. Also, documentation of the emergency or accessibility need to be addressed. Minnesota Housing may audit a minimum of 10% of all loans purchased. Audited loans are reviewed for Minnesota Housing Program and policy compliance, fraud or misrepresentation on the part of any party involved in the transaction, and trends and/or other indicators that may have an impact on the financial viability of the program in part or in whole. Minnesota Housing staff will also complete on-site monitoring activities as needed. All lenders must track all borrowers who have applied for the program using the applicant tracking sheet. The completed reports are due to Minnesota Housing semi-annually by March 31st and September 30th. Thank you for participating in the Emergency and Accessibility Loan Program training for processing a loan. For more information, or if you have any questions, please contact the program managers at Minnesota Housing or visit our website at mnhousing.gov. Thank you.